What's up, metalheads? Welcome to the Scrap Metal Podcast, the show for the misfits who've been listening to the same music since high school. I'm your host, John von Frankenstein, and joining me today is my metal thrashing mad co-host, Chris. Chris, I gotta ask you, man, how you feeling?
I gotta say, I'm feeling like I got off lucky.
You got off lucky.
Yes.
Chris up all night to get fun. Chris up all night to get fun. Chris up all night to feel lucky. Does this sudden love of Daft Punk have anything to do with how you're somehow keeping your heavy metal street cred?
Probably not, but I thought this was a really funny story that I wanted to share. So, A few episodes ago, I shared a very strange dream I had where I came to the conclusion I was dating Mara Wilson, who played Matilda in the 90s family film Matilda. And it was very weird. There was a lot of mental anguish in this dream because I couldn't remember the name of the person I was dating. So it was really weird. Recently, I was scrolling through some comments on Reddit where people were talking about strange experiences or strange dreams that they've had. And someone told a story. I don't remember if he said it happened to him or happened to someone he knew, but this person had a dream that they started dating a woman, proposed to her, got married, had kids, bought a house, raised a family. He dreamed like over a decade of his life with this family in this house. And at the end of his dream, he went to bed with his wife and then woke up in real life and was very confused because his wife wasn't next to him. He wasn't in his bedroom. He wasn't in his house. His kids weren't there. His family wasn't there. He was completely confused. And it took him like a full half hour to finally realize that he couldn't find this family or this house because he had dreamt it. And then like sank into a deep depression because he felt like he had lived 10 years with this family. Yeah. And now it was gone. And the dude like broke down alone in his room, like he like grieving this family he dreamed up. And so like that is so insane and so devastating. Like I'll admit I did like maybe a year or so ago have a dream where I dreamt I was dating someone, and my first thought when I woke up was to reach for my phone and text them. And then I looked in my messages and it was like, wait, she's not there. Ah, fuck, it was a dream. So, like, I feel like that's the worst I've ever gotten. You know, I dream that I am maybe dating Mara Wilson. Like, that's the worst that's happened to me. There are people out there dreaming entire lives and then waking up to realize that it was a dream and then, like, going into a deep depression because it was a dream. So that's why I feel like I got off extremely lucky with my Mara Wilson dream.
Was that not the green lamp dream? Is that not what it was called? I remember like maybe a year ago on like TikTok, people were talking about this Reddit thread of this guy who said he had gone through this experience where he had a family, he met this girl, they had kids and blah, 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 and they were married. And then one day he's like sitting down on his couch and he's having a cup of coffee and there's a green lamp across the room that looked odd. Like it wasn't 3D, it was like 2D. It looked like cardboard like pasted on the rest of the setting, and he woke up and was like, oh my god, I just dreamt that whole entire thing.
I really don't know, and like I said, I don't know if this comment was someone summarizing that story or telling the story from a different perspective, but it did seem like there were multiple people that had similar experiences where they had a dream, they dreamt a life for themselves in a dream, and then woke up to find that dream was not real. And like it like had a severe impact on their mental health to wake up and find that the life they built in their dream was not real.
2 weeks ago, I dreamt that I lost 40 pounds. And just now for dinner, I had 4 slices of pizza. So just imagine my dismay when I was like, oh, fuck, that's right. I don't have any sense of discipline or anything else about my health or my body. So I can understand how disappointed they would be. You know, Chris, I love when we have an opportunity to kind of take a deeper dive into subjects like that, right? Dreams and what they mean, and like the craziness surrounding how our brains work these things up, and even more so is trying to understand the mechanical aspects of the world around us, right? We've got guys building robots that we can ask to do stuff. We've got people building electric cars, right? We've got flying machines. We've got machines of industry, if you will, a sewing machine and stuff like that. I don't know why that's the first one that came to mind. But what I love is when people find a way to... I don't know where I'm going with this.
It's a deep dive into sewing machine metal. It's actually an arts and crafts episode. We're going to be sewing patches on our battle vests.
Yeah, there you go. You're going to sit with us and do that. It's a live stream, but we've actually just recorded it. Have fun. Chris, it's been a really long time since I've had a dream as fucked up as that. And it's also been a very long time since we've done one of our always fun deep dives into a style of music.
Yep.
And so, although, you know, we were just talking about like the craziness of dreams and getting all Freudian and that sort of stuff, one genre of music that takes on this dreamlike aspect and very cold, very mechanical aspect is industrial music, and in particular, industrial metal. It's the way that we've got this clinking and clanking of machines, loops and loops that just go round and round and are just constantly humming in the background of these songs. And the way that a band like Nine Inch Nails was able to turn this into, you know, basically guys just using like jackhammers during live performances into like super poppy, danceable industrial music. So that's what we're doing today. We're taking a deep dive into industrial metal. Chris, the last time that we got a little close to this genre, you did not have the best of times. So I'm excited to see if this episode kind of felt a little bit warmer to you, felt sort of like a family you might have dreamt up. You know what I mean? So, Chris, are you excited to take a deep dive into industrial metal?
I am actually excited to take this deep dive into industrial metal because what was interesting about this deep dive is that I would say the only other deep dive I would say I was already a fan of before going in was power metal. You know, the goth deep dive, not so much. Yeah. Stoner metal deep dive, I found some stuff that I like. You know, we did a metalcore episode, and that was just me coming up with new ways to say why I don't like that music. Right. What was interesting with industrial metal is that I feel like I've already gone through an industrial metal deep dive in a way, because I was introduced to some of these bands when I was in middle school and high school. Right. And I tried getting into some of those, you know, early 2000s industrial bands and realized it kind of wasn't for me. I liked the songs I liked, and that was about it. Right. But this was fun to, again, listen to some songs that I do like, maybe discover a few new songs that I now like, but for the most part, it kind of went the way I thought it would. But I think I have a better idea of, like, the point of industrial metal and how that it's really just heavy dance music. And, like, it's not meant to be, like, headbanged to the way, like, thrash metal might be. Right. It's meant to be listened to in a club, like in The Matrix when Neo meets Trinity. That's where you're supposed to listen to industrial metal. You know? Exactly. So it was interesting to hear that, and also hear where some of the industrial elements came from before it became industrial metal. Yeah, so like what I loved about being able to go back and listen to a lot of the super early industrial artists it was like the fact that it was actually like engineers being like, it'd be really interesting if we just took this like tape loop of this conveyor belt and just looped that. Yeah. And it was like this art form. It was an art form. It was never meant to be musical. It was almost more of an experiment of like, how can we use the tools of the time in recording
to just experiment with these sound bites that we had, and it was all tape loops and stuff, and it was like all engineers just coming up with their ways of making sounds, creating synthesizers and just making these tape loops and stuff like that. So it was never necessarily meant to have a musical quality, which makes a lot of sense when you start getting into like the really early bands that are like a little tougher to get into.
Definitely.
But I love that you mentioned the danceability of this music.
Yeah.
Because that's exactly what I think of anytime I hear industrial metal, is how, like you said, the club scene in The Matrix.
Yeah.
Right? Like the Blade Blood Rave. Like that style of music, it's like it invokes that image. And it always interested me how you had this very basic like you know, sort of like beat, and hearing how that evolved and how it came to be, and how you've got varying degrees of going from super mechanical to super poppy and danceable, and everything else in between there.
Yeah.
But it really is a style of music. Like whenever we do these deep dives, we try and give you guys broad strokes so you can kind of understand. For anyone that hasn't heard industrial metal before, has never had a chance to listen to industrial metal, or maybe you never realized that you were listening to industrial metal.
Yeah.
It's basically a form of music that involved from very artsy, experimental, early electronic music. They were using synthesizers and drum machines and samples on other samples of machinery to give that industrial type of feel, and that's where the name comes from. And it was very anti-music. It wasn't supposed to be this Western idea of verse, chorus, bridge, outro. You know what I mean? Like sort of structure. It was very just experimental. And now you've got like bands like Nine Inch Nails and Rammstein that, you know, you've got people singing along to lyrics in German.
Yeah.
That don't otherwise speak German.
Yeah.
And then there's also like the huge influence that you got from Europe and like, you know, Belgium, Germany, like all these bands that hailed from Europe that really gave, I think they brought more of like that club element that you were talking about, that danceability and stuff. But the early bands that are classified, I guess we always talk about like that, the proto element, right?
Yeah.
Proto-industrial, I guess you could call them. With our goth deep dive, we realized that it was called post-punk. And I never called it that. I just always considered post-punk goth music. And really funny story, The Cure, at the time of the recording of this episode, The Cure just recently dropped a new single. And so there was an article online that was like, Robert Smith says that The Cure is not a goth band. And then there's this guy like reposting that. He's like, nothing is more goth than being like, I'm not goth. But a lot of the really early bands, and hang on with me here, because this is a real fucking, I am
good luck
swinging for the fucking fences. All right, some of my fucking furniture is about to start levitating. Einstürzenden Neubauten is, I believe, how you say it. It roughly translates to collapsing new buildings, something along those lines.
Okay.
But they've got, you know, songs like Collapse, Tanzdabil, Yonggong, which is actually it's a retelling of I think it was a Japanese fable, but its subtitle in there in parentheses is Futter Mein Ego. So in that song in particular, you can hear where it's like very early industrial, like very straight ahead, very non-musical, but it has that danceability in the background and that very steady beat that you could hear. Then you had bands like Cabaret Voltaire that started doing stuff where like they influenced another band called DAF. They had a song called Do the Mussolini, parentheses, head kick.
Yeah.
And then DAF did Der Mussolini. And that's where things started getting even more like danceable.
Yeah.
Kind of getting ahead of ourselves here, but then you get into like EBM, which is electric body music, and that's like taking industrial and you're cranking up like the disco meter. You're cranking up the club and like dance meter on that. You had Throbbing Gristle, Suicide, Kraftwerk, all of these bands super influential. Suicide was the one that interested me the most because they were like very punk and a lot of people consider them death rock. And it was just like a drummer and a keyboardist. And they were that's where like a lot of the elements of like the weird samples and weird sounds that you'll get in industrial, I think, started to bleed in, was with the influence of bands like Suicide. But Chris, of these early bands, were you able, like, did you get a chance to listen to any of them, kind of sample what they were putting out there? Did you have any favorites along the way with this early proto-industrial bunch?
You know, so listening to it, it was very clearly, like you've been saying, it had that electronic feel and sound to it because, like you're saying, it was engineers fucking around. And so I've often talked about how the thing that usually turns me off in some of the music I like is when they start introducing more electronic sounds. So it wasn't necessarily things that like I could see myself really enjoying and really getting into, but like the song Collapse by Einsters and Neubauten, you know, it was an interesting, so I start playing, it's like 8 minutes long and it starts with just noise.
Yeah.
But it sounds like, I don't know if it's feedback. I don't know if it's a distorted instrument. I don't know what it is, but it had this cool kind of like eerie sound to it before getting into like a drum beat or anything like that, or a repetitive beat. So it's interesting to hear that and kind of, you know, like we've said with these proto genres, whenever we do these deep dives, it was really cool to see how these bands, you can see how the trajectory would bring us to Nine Inch Nails. Right. Like you can see how this would give us Rammstein. You know, you can 100% see that. And it was also fun to finally listen to Kraftwerk because I believe the band in The Big Lebowski that pretends to kidnap Bunny, played by Peter Stormare, Flea, and I forget who the other actor is. I think they're supposed to be like a band similar to Kraftwerk.
Yeah.
Like they're supposed to be that kind of band. So it's fun to finally listen to Kraftwerk. And like it's interesting and it's fun to hear the creativity that, you know, these engineers had, but at the same time, it's like, this isn't for me. I'm not gonna sit down and listen to it, but it's not meant to be sat down and listened to. It's meant to be experienced, I guess.
Right. Which is where, like, it's interesting to me that so many of these bands were more like performance art collectives.
Yeah.
That said, like, okay, we are a bunch of artists that have gotten together and we may not know how to play musical instruments, but this dude's really good at like audio engineering and this guy, you know, can record stuff. So like that, let's just start putting all of that together and making, that's why I say that it was very purposefully non-musical. It wasn't meant to be, you know, like here are some pretty chords with a really nice melody over it. A lot of times the lyrics and the vocals are just like drowned in reverb and echo. And it's all, you hear it said a lot with modern music that there's no longer like a chorus, there's no longer structures to songs, right? It's just like there's a hook, there's a verse, and then it's just the big chorus and it's a musical chorus. There aren't really any words to choruses anymore in a lot of pop music. But that it's more so, music nowadays is more so about the experimentation in production. How can we produce these sounds and how can we produce something that sounds big and making these new sounds? And I feel like there are elements of that in this, in the proto-industrial stuff, where it was just, how can we make these songs sound cool? And like you said, with a song like Collapse, it's just noise. It's experimenting in noise and like the colors. And I could imagine that seeing that as part of a live performance would be way more captivating than just like throwing it on. Yeah. I feel like someone that listens to this like on the regular is very much kind of saying to themselves like, I'm going to be a little pretentious about putting this on and saying that I really enjoy listening to this, because it's not like something like I want to say his name is Peter Glass, and I think that's wrong, but He has a record
Koyanis
called
Katsi. Yeah, I think that's or Philip Glass.
Philip Glass. Thank you. There you go. And it's just repetitive.
Yeah.
It's super, super repetitive. And I love that stuff because it's like all sequences.
Yeah.
But I could not sit there for an afternoon and be like, yes, try this cheese paired with this beautiful wine. Do you like my Philip Glass record? And like people would want to fucking kill me by the end of the evening.
See, does that make me pretentious? Because I have sat down and not only watched Koyanis Katsi, but have listened to, on multiple occasions, Koyanis Katsi.
There's nothing wrong with that. And there's I don't think that you're pretentious, but I think that there's a level of like enjoyment versus fascination, and like watching how this is done and watching it being performed and like sitting and just like absorbing it and saying like, wow, it really took a lot to put this together. But I'm not going to be dancing to a lot of this stuff.
Yeah,
that's where like DAF's Der Mussolini was, where they were like, no, we're gonna make it danceable. They're making fun of fucking Mussolini. Like the video, and I've brought this channel up before, the Trash Theory channel, and his series of videos called New British Canon, which I love. This guy's videos are awesome. If you want a lot of really cool video essays from someone way more eloquent than myself, definitely check that stuff out. Because New British Canon is where I saw his video on how industrial went pop, which was a big inspiration on this episode. And so, yeah, he describes it as like they took one of history's worst figures and turned it into like a stupid dance. It's like Elaine doing the little kicks and stuff like that. That giving birth to EBM, where stuff got way more danceable, and then you get bands like Nitzer Ebb, who I love, and it's just so interesting to see how all of that stuff evolves. And then you start to get into like industrial proper, where now you've got those elements and they're starting to get a little bit more structured. They're starting to sound like actual songs, not just experiments in sound and soundscapes and soundtracks pretty much. They are actually crafting songs. And one of the first bands that I dove into, and like one of the most popular names, and a band that I had heard of for years upon years upon years, was Skinny Puppy. And I was so surprised to listen to them and be like, okay, some of this stuff is really cool. I really like a lot of it, but a lot of it is also very much in the weeds for me. Yeah. You know what I mean? It was like some of it was just a little too much on that artsy side still. You know what I mean? Yeah. Yeah, definitely, because this is, I feel like, industrial proper, and then even as we get into like industrial metal, these are where you start to see those bands that I like the songs I like, but I don't like entire albums. Or I prefer the sound on certain albums over other albums, because it's still all industrial music. It's still all experimenting the same way. It's just the experiments now are also including how much distorted electric guitar am I including, and how much am I focusing on the electronic danceability of these songs. And I think for me, and maybe the fact that some of the more popular songs sound more guitar-based with some of these bands, I think to the public, an instrument like the guitar is easier to latch onto when you hear it. Right. If you're just trying to listen to a 3.5 minute long song. If you want an 8-minute long song that is the same drum beat at the same tempo for 8.5 minutes, these bands have you covered. They have those songs too. But if there's something you want to listen to that's basically radio-friendly industrial music, these are the bands that really have you covered, and these are some of the bands. So I know I did listen to a little bit of Skinny Puppy. I feel like the song, I know you included in your notes, Assimilate, was a song I checked out, and it was like, it was definitely something where I was like, I could see myself in the future maybe listening to this song, maybe trying to listen to an entire album, but there's no guarantee I'm going to listen to this and be like, oh yeah, I'm a big industrial fan now. Like, I don't think that's going to happen, but I think I am going to find more music in that style that I like. And bands like this that are able to kind of experiment in both directions is a big part of that. I love that you mentioned that, where it's like, okay, I'm able to find things that I like in this, but maybe it's the setting itself. Like, I feel like you don't discover, I discovered Skinny Puppy through our goth deep dive. I'd never really listened to them until we did that deep dive. So like for a lot of those bands, I was listening to them like while I'm on the treadmill. Yeah. It's the perfect treadmill music because it's just a steady beat and it's helping you keep a pace. So like when I first heard Assimilate, I was like, whoa, the vocals are really fucking wicked. The drum beat and the synthesizers and everything are really, really cool. The production on it is really awesome. But yeah, it's an 8-minute long song. So I'm like, towards the end of it, I was like giving it the 75% rule, where I was like, I got the gist of this song, I'm skipping to the next. and that's no disrespect to them, but I feel like if I was hearing this music in a club and like I'm having a conversation with someone and suddenly I hear like Warlock or Smothered Hope by Skinny Puppy playing in the background, and I'm like, hold on a minute, I've got to find out who this is. That's the setting where I feel like, all right, now you're in it. Now you're dancing and you're in the element that the music was meant to be experienced in. Yeah. And I think it's really tough. We said the same thing about during our stoner metal deep dive, where it's like, if you're listening to this style of music on headphones, that's one thing. Yeah, you're going to get the basic gist of it. But unless you're listening to it on a proper set of speakers, really fucking loud, and you're like feeling the bass hit you, you're not gonna get that full effect. And like, I think that their most accessible song, and that's like a really loose use of the term accessible, is probably Dig It, which has a lot in common with 9 Inch Nails. I couldn't put my finger on if it was Down in It or Terrible Lie. That sounded a lot like Dig It. But if you listen to any of those songs back to back, you're like, oh shit, all right, this is shared DNA there. Besides Skinny Puppy, Front 242 is another industrial band that had a lot of really cool songs that I was able to get into, and like Chris mentioned, had more of the danceability. Don't Crash, Welcome to Paradise, Headhunter. The lyrics in Headhunter were so like delivered so on the grid, like straight and very, man hunts man to sell him to another man. And I'm like, this is fucking cool, because it's and same thing with Welcome to Paradise. Welcome to Paradise has this sample of like a preacher. He's like, hey, poor, you don't gotta be poor no more, praise Jesus. And like that sort of like that you start to see in a lot of like White Zombie and Ministry, that's where you start to see a lot of that stuff coming forward. And Front 242 is a really cool band to listen to if you like those like movie quote loops or just like random quotes that get thrown in. Until Death Us Do Part is another one that was very, very cool from Front 242. And it's just, again, a lot of those bands, it was the use of those samples that just get you into that like repetitive nature where you're headbanging while you're dancing. And that's such a cool feel. I mean, Ministry, we've already brought them up, and we've brought them up so many times. Yeah. I love that Ministry did the goth band thing of like, this first album we really didn't like. We didn't want to make such a popular album. We didn't mean to make something so poppy. And then they went like full industrial. And we've talked about them tons. Chris, you actually had a huge hand in getting me into Ministry. So, like, this is not my first time hearing Ministry or listening to them or even bringing them up on this podcast, but Chris actually was a really big part of me getting into them.
Yeah, Ministry, like I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, is a band that I was introduced to and tried to get into. Some of it is right up my alley because, like I said, some of it is very much guitar-based industrial metal, and so he uses a lot of samples. He'll use electronic elements, but at the same time, it'll be guitar-based. And so, like, the first song I heard was No W, which is using quotes from George W. Bush and all this and that. And then you have, like, synthesized orchestras accenting the notes he's playing. And it's such a cool fucking song. The wordplay in the song is really cool. And I think what's fun about a band like Ministry and what Al Jorgensen does with Ministry is that with some of these industrial bands that do have lyrics, like you were saying with, what was it, Front 242, where it felt very like on the beat, they're saying the word and repeating the word. To me, again, sitting on my couch listening to it, that gets boring.
Right.
At least with Ministry, Al Jorgensen has actual lyrics that move forward and aren't same syllable, same beat over and over again. So a song like No W does a great job with that. You know, Jesus Built My Hot Rod, I feel like even does with that. Even though the music in Jesus Built My Hot Rod is kind of repetitive because of the drum beat, the lyrics are also nonsense, where he's like ding dang a dong ding ding bing bong, like, you know, and it's a
precursor
a lot of fun.
to fucking Rob Zombie, dude.
Yeah, but it's so that's a lot of fun. And then like I had found like a Loudwire Industrial Essentials I was listening to, and there was other Ministry songs on that playlist that I was listening to that I was like, yeah, this is the industrial metal that I can really get into. There's just enough of the electronic elements that it enhances the sound. And so I think that's almost like the approach I've had with like power metal or like symphonic death metal, where it's like, at what point does the music go from guitar based to electronic based? And I'm willing to go like 51% to 49% guitar to electronic. Once you go past that and it becomes keyboard or synth bass, you're starting to lose me. But when it's like a guitar riff bass, but you have those synths or you have those sound effects in there, and those sound effects are there just to add to the intensity or to add to the experience, that I really enjoy. And those are the Ministry songs I really enjoy. And those are some of the other songs that I really enjoy. Other times when these bands focus on the electronic stuff, that's when they start to lose me.
See, I feel like a band like KMFDM really fucking walks that line.
Yes.
Like, how did you feel about them?
So KMFDM, I heard A Drug Against War when the music video was featured in an episode of Beavis and Butthead. So when I was in high school, I started watching Beavis and Butthead again, and A Drug Against War plays. And the music video fucking rules.
Yeah.
And so there's a sick music video, and the song is awesome. The guitar riff is awesome. The drum beat is very much like driving you forward, which is like something that I do like about this music, is that even though the drum beats can sometimes be too repetitive to my taste, I feel like with a song like A Drug Against War, the guitars do like just enough of a different thing every once in a while that I'm not bothered by the repetitive drums. So A Drug Against War, I fucking love. And I love that song. I will listen to it all the time. Discovering that song, discovering KMFDM, I listened to that album, and I'm like, the rest of this album is trash. I want nothing to do with the rest of this album. And then I like tried listening to some other stuff from them, and I'm like, I don't want anything to do with this band at all. But I think a big part of that is because KMFDM, I believe, is two people who every album work with different artists and different musicians. So it's, while KMFDM is considered like industrial or industrial metal or whatever it is, they dip into a lot of different genres. And the album with A Drug Against War, I believe is called Angst, was them dipping their toes into heavy metal, where they're like, hey, for the first time, we're going to have a guitar player on this album. And that's why A Drug Against War is my favorite song. It's the song that was featured in Beavis and Butthead, is, you know, for me, the best song KMFDM has ever done, because it's a guitar-based industrial metal song.
Right.
The rest of their music is not that. Which clearly there's an audience for that. I knew a guy in college who would wear his KMFDM t-shirt like once a week. You know, there's definitely an audience for that style of music. I am not in that audience. I will listen to A Drug Against War over and over and over again. I will not listen to anything else from them.
So I thought that you might be a little bit more into them. I was hoping that you liked A Drug Against War, and I'm glad that there was a story to go along with that. But like a song like Megalomaniac, I thought is like super, super cool. The one that has fucking stuck with me, and the one that I will play like in the car as loud as I possibly fucking can, because it's like, it's just metal enough, like you said, like it's got a really cool guitar riff, but it just has that fucking danceability. Juke Joint Jezebel is so fucking good. It is so good. I fucking love this song. The way that the female vocals come in during the chorus and stuff, you know what I mean? Like it sounds big, and that paired with the guitar riff sounds so good, and then it just has that driving drum beat, that danceability that's in there too.
Yeah.
And it's like the build up just before the chorus hits with like the other synths and stuff that come in and the other guitar lines. Dude, it's so much fun. It's so much fun. And then I like what they do with this song because it employs more of the heavy metal guitar, but in a cut and paste fashion. Like when you hear it, you can tell it's like someone played this riff, but then they chopped it up.
Okay.
Almost the way that like a hip hop producer would.
Yeah.
To make it a new riff. So
interesting.
You can hear where it's not like a dun 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 dun. You can hear it's dun 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 dun, where you can hear the start of the loop again.
Yeah.
It's I know I just did the Vanilla Ice thing of like, it's not ding 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 ding. It's ding 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 ding. But there is that really subtle difference that you can hear in the way that the riff gets composed because of that. And it's in this song that they get the fucking like. So when I first heard of KMFDM, I was like, what does this stand for?
Kill motherfucking Depeche Mode.
I think it's kill motherfucking Depeche Mode. It's not,
but that's what fans say.
But they sing it in this song. They sing it. And I was like, oh my God, is it kill motherfucking Depeche Mode? So I was like, I was so excited to hear that when I actually listened to it in the car. Their song Light has almost the same exact guitar riff, but it sounds like they sampled this song to make Kunst. And I was like, so I need all of you guys to just listen to this fucking song and just comment or whatever, just retweet and do whatever the fuck you guys are going to do. But please tell me that I'm not crazy and that this is actually a chopped up riff, just making a whole new riff. A band like Nitzer Ebb is one that I feel like you would not have, because this is way more danceable. This is like, Nitzer Ebb is where you get into the EBM that I mentioned earlier, electric body music.
Yeah.
So like with a band like, I think, was it Kraftwerk or was it Cabaret Voltaire? Was where you started to get more of the EBM stuff. And it was first called, I think it was copper music or body music is what it was called at first. And then it went from body music to electric body music. And Nitzer Ebb first came to my attention with their song Join in the Chant, which is the like quintessential, super basic lyric, really cool drum beat that just loops for fucking 5 or 6 minutes and just like screaming. And I was like, this is the greatest fucking song I've ever fucking heard. And I played it like non-stop. Hearts and Minds is really great. Murderous is really cool. Control, I'm Here is really awesome. But this is like the way more. This is the like they went 60% danceability and synthesized and electronic instruments and way less guitar. There's guitar here and there in their stuff, but it's way less relied on. It's more so about the synthesizers and the drum machines and stuff. And to see that these guys are still performing as well, it's just two dudes. And like they are up there giving it their all, like it's still 1980 something. I think the album that Join in the Chant is on came out in 88 or 86, and they're still up there fucking doing this shit. Yeah. Did you check out Join in the Chant? I need to know if there was any inkling of like, all right, I could maybe work with this.
I don't remember if I feel like somehow I missed these bands right here at the end of the list, because I think I got into KMFDM and was looking at other stuff. I feel like I missed these bands, but it doesn't sound like something I'm going to check out anyway, so I guess I wasn't missing out on much.
See, like, I feel like you'd like My Life with the Thrill Kill Cult, who I knew because of their inclusion on the Crow soundtrack.
Okay.
With their song After the Flesh. And, like, After the Flesh and the Days of Swine and Roses, I feel like is super Ministry-esque, and I think you would like that.
Yeah.
The Devil Does Drugs is really cool. That's another one where it's, like, just a constant vocal loop. And I loved this one fucking song because it had like a Fall Out Boy song title. A girl doesn't get killed by a make-believe lover because it's hot. And I was like, oh my God. All right, I got to tell Chris about those guys. But the band that I think takes us from now like EBM and industrial straight into industrial metal is Frontline Assembly. And their album Millennium is so fucking drenched and doused with heavy metal. It's so fucking metal. I read somewhere, and I don't know if this is true or not, but I read somewhere that Devin Townsend played guitar on the album as well, but they also use a ton of samples from heavy metal songs. Their song, Surface Patterns, does the most clever thing in my mind. They sample Don't Tread on Me, and it goes from the dun 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 riff at the beginning of Don't Tread on Me to the dun 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 of Walk. Dude, Don't Tread on Me to Walk. Just the wordplay in the titles alone for the samples that they're using. That's so fucking clever to me. I love that. And I was like, so I'm listening. The first song that I had heard from them was Millennium, which samples New Level by Pantera. And I was like, holy shit. Because they take the that riff from New Level, and they just turn it into I was like, holy shit. Like, this is where you really start to see the creativity that is used to take these very recognizable heavy metal riffs and inject them into the industrial music, which is like, they are still very, very steeped in the industrial sound.
Yes.
But they managed to build that really cool bridge between the two. Vigilante uses the Master of Puppets riff, like the really crazy spider riff before the verse.
Yeah.
And they just chop it up in the same way that KMFDM did with Kunst to just make it two notes.
Oh, okay.
And they just take the first two notes of the riff and they just loop that. And I was like, when I picked it out, I was like, holy shit, this is fucking genius.
Yeah.
I was so blown away by these guys. Like, I think if there's any band that you would be able to listen to and be like, all right, here's some danceable industrial that still kicks a lot of fucking ass, it would be Frontline Assembly.
I did actually check out Surface Patterns because I saw you say Don't Tread on Me and Walk. I was like, all right, I got to check this out.
Yeah.
And yeah, it starts off very electronic, very dance music, but then you get those riffs coming in and it sounds cool as fuck. And it made me think, when we first said we were going to do this deep dive and I'm looking into industrial metal and the history of industrial music, something that I did see is that some like metal bands or thrash metal bands would have their songs remixed by industrial bands because they wanted it to sound like the heavier industrial sounds. And they wanted to, make their faster metal music sound more like this heavy danceable music and kind of mesh the two. And so hearing that story and then seeing, this band Frontline Assembly, sampling thrash metal songs for this dance music, like that is really cool. It's really cool when you can hear. That's why I love a song like She Watches Channel Zero by Public Enemy, because they are using a riff from Raining Blood by Slayer and they're rapping over it. And I love that shit. So seeing this where it's, dance music, industrial metal, whatever you want to call it, they're taking, like, not just coming up with their own riffs, they are using what are quintessential heavy metal riffs and turning them into this new style of music, which is really cool.
Yeah, they're using the elements that were there before, and not just like, they're not totally stripping them away, but they're using it to enhance what they've already been doing. And so like, as we start to get into industrial metal, you have the influence of bands like Ministry and KMFDM and Frontline Assembly and, you know, all of the movie quote loops and stuff like that, and the cool drum beats and the really heavy guitars, and you start getting much more guitar driven. You start getting more riff based stuff. You start getting what feels more like a metal song. And so a really great example of that is White Zombie.
Yeah.
White Zombie and Rob Zombie took that and fucking ran with it.
Yep.
And it wasn't until their last 2 albums that White Zombie were like, we're now going to perfect this. Because all of their earlier albums, they've got like 4 albums before that.
Yeah.
But they were more like straight ahead, sort of crust punkish, like kind of metal, but just like nothing that ever really hit. They're okay albums. But once you got to like those 2 classic albums, I always mix up the fucking titles, the Sexorcista and whatever the fucking other one was. But those 2 albums find a way to really blend together the elements of industrial music and that danceability and fully injecting them with that world of heavy metal. Like Thunder Kiss.
Yeah.
That's a great fucking song.
Yes.
And it's, for all intents and purposes, that could have just been like, we're going to sample this riff and just loop it.
Yeah.
But it's all played live.
Yeah.
And that's what makes, that's what gives it a different kind of feel. It gives it more of that heavy metal feel. It gives it more of that like live rock and roll type of feel. And like, it's so interesting to see how Rob Zombie went from White Zombie to his solo stuff and stuff like, you know, like Dragula and Living Dead Girl, Super Beast, where a lot of the industrial stuff laid in the drum beats.
Yeah.
And the samples that he would use. But it was all heavy metal. And that's where, like, once you get into that territory, now it's heavy metal being enhanced with industrial elements, as opposed to something that, like, Front 242 or Frontline Assembly was doing, where they were using industrial being enhanced by metal elements. You know, it's just flipping the relationship around.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of like I was saying before, that's what I'm looking for, and that's why I enjoy a song like Thunder Kiss. And even Dragula is, the verses don't have any music other than the drum beat under his vocals. And so it's kind of leaning into the more dancey, drum-focused, and maybe electronic-focused feel. I believe it's Dragula that's playing in that scene where we're introduced to the club in The Matrix.
Yep.
But
it's an industrial mix of Dragula.
Yeah. And I think what I really like about Thunder Kiss, like you're saying, is that it's repetitive, but it's being played over and over again. And so it just feels like a very heavy rock and roll song. And I think that's what's kind of fun about it, is that, you know, you kind of have this like old school horror movie vibe playing heavier old school rock and roll. You know, that's maybe what they were going for. And I think that's why Rob Zombie is someone who, you know, I would listen to Dragula. I would listen to what I think feels So Numb, I think, is a song, because I think some of his music, you know, and I think some other bands will talk about, you know, some of their music was featured in WWE, and I think Rob Zombie had a couple songs in WWE, and that was some of my exposure to these bands as well.
I feel like industrial metal was the reason that it was used in WWE is like, this was a style of music that was super popular when we were coming up in our teenage years. So like, you were hearing industrial metal everywhere.
Yep.
I remember one of the very first times that I'd heard Rammstein was through, was it like a preview for the movie Triple X or something like that?
Maybe.
Like Fire Fright or whatever, that however you say that song. I don't know. I don't speak German. I'm so sorry. I know Du Hast, and that's about it.
Yeah.
But I remember hearing that song and like seeing the music video and the flamethrowers on the guitars and being like, holy shit, this is fucking insane. These guys are nuts. Is this all German that they're singing in? I'm confused. But yeah, Rammstein is another band where it's like, this was the industrial metal where it was still like live played drums and, live guitars and stuff. But the industrial elements came in the way that they were using the soundscapes and the synthesizers to create that colder mechanical type of sound. And like, they are not for nothing, but they are the perfect blend of heavy metal and industrial. And the fact that they sing in German gives it that additional bit of like industrial street cred.
Yes.
You know what I mean? It makes it feel very rooted in the style. And so, yeah, songs like Links 234, Du Hast, Sonne, I think it's called, or pronounced. It's just all really, really great songs. And they managed to make stuff that's catchy. They managed to make stuff that sounds heavy, but still feels very, very mechanical in the way that it's played. And it's like, it's that guitar tone too. You know, like any of the when you talk about like industrial guitar tone, it's all very cold. It's all very like, you get a lot of highs in the distortion.
Yeah.
A lot of highs in the sound. And it sounds almost like fizzy. It sounds almost like you're playing it through this tiny little practice amp that's like about to break because you're pushing it too hard. And like a band like that and a band like Static X even found a way to have the heavy metal elements get enhanced with a lot of the industrial stuff that they did. And I've talked about Static X how many times now on the show.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I wasn't surprised at all when you said Wayne Static himself referred to himself as evil disco. Like, that is industrial metal. It's evil disco. It's like you've got good disco, which is the Bee Gees, and then you've got evil disco, which is all of these fucking bands.
Yeah, dude. It's I love them, and I love the fact that they were able to, like Wayne's original idea of being like, yeah, we were going to create like these really crazy, trippy, like techno songs and then add in the guitars. And then it was like, actually, we should just be a metal band, and then cut the build-ups down a little bit. And like, it kind of morphed into that as they went on later and later in their careers. But like on Wisconsin Death Trip, you can hear that they were still very, very industrial, still super, super techno influenced, and had a lot more of those elements at the forefront than they did as they went on later on in their career. But they're another great example. Fear Factory I included in the list because of the samples, because of the drums. Like, again, everything is live. They're not really using drum loops per se, but I feel like they had that cold sort of feel. Very cold, very mechanical. All of their songs have to do with the blurring of the lines between, man and machine. Yeah. And, they were featured on a Terminator video game back in the day. Like, I love stuff like that, where it does give that sort of like very, very rigid, again, almost like a sample, almost like it's a sample that's being played, that they're just looping and playing to a grid. But it's just how well the guitars and the drums are able to lock in with one another. I feel like when we talk about industrial metal, we have to include Marilyn Manson on there. Yes. It's because, like, despite any opinions about the guy, his influence cannot be, like, we can't talk about industrial metal without talking about him, because of how many people he reached. I think is the thing. Like, his music reached such a wide audience and was the introduction to so many people, not just to heavy metal, but then to say like, oh, cool, there's this other genre of music that you can get into from this too, which, like, I think that has its merits as well, I guess.
I think what made Marilyn Manson interesting is that first, most of us first heard of him by hearing a story that he had his ribs removed so that he could fellatiate himself.
The fact that we all heard that before the internet was around.
So that was every millennial's introduction to Marilyn Manson was that. Not his music, that fun fact. Yeah. Honestly, the first time I probably heard his music would have been Beautiful People being used for SmackDown. So, I liked that song. I think shortly after that, he came out with an album and he had the song Mob Scene. And I really liked that song. The music video was a lot of fun. And then, I think I was in college. I think his cover of Personal Jesus. That's interesting. His cover of Sweet Dreams Are Made of This is
oh my God,
interesting.
What you fucking hear everywhere.
It's definitely an interesting take. And, that's some of the stuff that I've listened to. But yeah, I feel like Marilyn Manson, for me, it was probably either KMFDM or Marilyn Manson that was my introduction to this is what industrial is. Honestly, I think Marilyn Manson was first, considering when SmackDown would have started using Beautiful People. I think I was a little bit older when I started watching Beavis and Butthead again. So I think Marilyn Manson would have been first for me. And it was kind of like okay, this is industrial metal, apparently, but also the elements of shock rock that kind of made me enjoy Alice Cooper at the time, growing up and being a fan of Schools Out and things like that. So I think those were some of the reasons why Marilyn Manson might have been like an early introduction for me. And so, yeah, that was interesting. And yeah, it's there's lots of opinions you can have about the person, but the musician and the artist and the band, what it was originally supposed to be, not just him. There's a lot of talent there, a lot of fun stuff going on there. And I think it is a good way to kind of introduce you to industrial metal and kind of be like, this is the most metal industrial. And then if you like the elements that make it industrial, you'll find industrial metal. But if you like the elements of Marilyn Manson that make, his music metal, you're probably not going to like the other industrial music. And that's kind of the way I felt about, Rob Zombie as well. I liked the aspects that were rock and metal, not so much the aspects that were industrial. While we're talking here, I want to bring up an interesting, possibly surprising fun fact. I had, to my knowledge, never heard the song Du Hast until I listened to it for this episode.
Okay.
And when I did, I was like, this is a fucking techno song. Like, for all this time, I have seen people quoting Du Hast and talking about how great Rammstein is and all this and that. And so I'm like, I never went out of my way to listen to it and never really went out of my way to listen to, I think, any Rammstein. Yeah. And then I listened to it and I'm like, wait, what? Like, this is what it is? And I think Du Hast specifically does the thing that I already said I don't like. He says Du Hast 30,000 times, and those appear to be the only lyrics in the song. And I'm like, say something else, dude. Like, and that repetitive nature is what turns me off of some of the industrial elements of these songs. When I listen to some of their other stuff, I think in that playlist I was going through, their song America is in there. Yeah. That's a pretty good song. That I actually enjoyed. It was a little repetitive, but I think, if I'm remembering correctly, there was a little bit more guitar in there that made it a song that I enjoyed a little bit more. And then going back to a band like Fear Factory is a band I saw in this playlist. I listened to them and I was like, oh, these guys are just metal. They're too heavy to be called nu metal. Yeah. Yeah. But so they get lumped in with industrial. Another band that came up was Filter that I saw in the playlist. And same thing with Filter, where they were playing very heavy metal. That was too heavy to call it nu metal. Yeah. So it gets lumped in with industrial. And so it was interesting to listen to that and be like, okay, this is the quote unquote industrial metal I could get into because it lacks all of the most important aspects of industrial metal.
Yeah. I'm glad that you're able to kind of like gauge what everyone's perception of industrial metal is from the outside, because for a lot of our viewers and a lot of our listeners, they may have never dipped their toes into the industrial metal pool before.
Yeah.
So to say like, hey, if you want something that's strictly straight ahead heavy metal but has like sort of a mechanical, like really tight to the grid sort of sound to it, check out these bands. If you like a lot of the danceability and like you're into like house music and techno and you know, stuff like that, you're going to love like the industrial proper side of things. So like it's cool that we've got like you and I are both ends of those spectrums. Where I'll swing. I am bisexual when it comes to industrial metal. I'll go both ways. Where I guess you're cis metal.
Yes,
is what I'm
yes,
trying to say.
I am cis industrial.
Oh, maybe we should cut this. Our point being, it's cool that we can kind of like, you are giving like the outline for people to say like, all right, if it's easier for you to get into this style of music and it's easier for you to get into it if it has these elements, then check out these bands. So Chris is basically like trying to filter stuff out for you guys, pretty much.
It's almost like good gatekeeping, where I'm like standing there and someone is like, hey, I really like guitar-based music. It's like, you're going to want to take the left path. Yeah. And then it's like, I really want to like dance to my heavy metal music. It's like, all right, you go to the right path. And like, I'll point
you that guy in the back who's waving and it's just me going, hi!
You see the white dudes with dreads and face tattoos, go dance with them. You see the dudes that are just like normal looking guys in jeans and t-shirts, go hang out with them, you know?
You know what I was going to say to you before is that I'm so mad that I didn't buy a set of like tiny little black glasses for this episode, because oh my god, I'm so fucking mad. I wanted to dress like super industrial for this. But the band that is like, they are the poster boys for industrial metal and just probably the biggest fucking name in the industrial metal genre are 9 Inch Nails and Trent Reznor. Trent has found a way. They also did the thing that fucking Ministry did, and they're like, sorry, we didn't mean to make such a like easily digestible first fucking album. Here's this that's gonna make you hate yourself and be really fucking sad. But Pretty Hate Machine is the result of like someone who was getting into that, like who had that industrial background and also just had such good pop sensibilities when it came to their songwriting. That's why a song like Head Like a Hole and fucking Terrible Lie, Down in It, those songs are so catchy. Yeah. Because Trent just had an ear for what would be super, super hooky. Yeah. If you've ever seen footage of like the band that he was in before he started 9 Inch Nails, they were just like a regular old like 80s synth pop band. And it's awesome to see that stuff and awesome to see how like he was able to find a sound that was his own and experiment in the classical sense of industrial, really experimenting with the sound samples, you know, with the samples and the loops and the soundscapes that he was creating, but still injecting that danceability. Head Like a Hole is like just the perfect fucking example of it. Yeah,
definitely.
But then you've got a song like Haunted, Closer, which we talked recently about how funny it is that like people our age now dance to, you know, emo music at weddings and stuff like that. And I think I had brought it up at my friend Amanda's wedding. Fucking Closer came on, and here is a room full of 30-somethings screaming while someone's, you know, grandma from Connecticut is sitting in the back, and everyone's going, I wanna fuck you like an animal. And like, to have a chorus like that is so steeped in the industrial tradition. Yeah. It's not supposed to feel good.
One of the earliest industrial bands is called Throbbing Gristle.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah.
When you call your band Erect Cock, like, come on, dude.
Exactly. But there is a reason why 9 Inch Nails and Trent Reznor, like, why he's so revered. Yeah. because he really did take industrial from this underground style of music and really opened up the door for so many people to say, like, here's my band.
Yeah.
Here are some really fucking catchy tunes. The Hand That Feeds. What's the other song? Only? There is no fucking you. There is only me.
Maybe.
That song's so fucking good. And it's like, okay, if you like that, like you're saying, if you like that, Trent gives you the perfect balance of both roads.
Yeah.
Where you can say, here's stuff that's super, super, super danceable. Here's stuff with a lot of heavy guitars in this together. And what is the other one that I'm thinking of? March of the Pigs? No, not March of the Pigs. God damn it. Hold on. I got to look this up. Yes. It is March of the Pigs. I'm a fucking idiot. But yeah, like the way that song starts out. That's like super early industrial. Like, here's this really fucked up sounding drum loop.
Yeah.
And then here comes the guitars. And like cool fucked up fucking meter that it's played in, all of that. And it's so good. But he found a way to balance all of that.
Yeah.
To make it to make this style that was so primitive and so cold sounding. Like you listen to something like Assimilate by Skinny Puppy, and then you listen to something like March of the Pigs, and you're like, there's so much in common here.
Yeah.
But Trent was able to inject it with that glitter of the pop world. You know what I mean? And I don't know if that's dumbing his music down at all. Because he's an incredible artist.
Yeah.
He is an incredible artist. He's an incredible songwriter and producer and everything. But I don't think it's wrong to say that he has his finger on the pulse when it comes to those pop sensibilities and writing something that's super catchy and something that's super hooky. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think, as I hear you talking about Trent Reznor, and I'll admit, I have not listened to a lot of Nine Inch Nails. I don't know a lot about Trent Reznor, but early in this episode, we talked about how proto-industrial was a bunch of engineers fucking around in the studio.
Yeah.
Looping tapes, playing things over and over again, and seeing what kind of sounds they could make. The perception there is that these are guys that are maybe not musically inclined when it comes to playing an instrument, but they know what a catchy beat sounds like. And they know, because they are sound engineers, how to create that catchy beat. And so instead of being able to play the instruments to do it, they just use the tools they knew how to use to do that. And Trent Reznor, I don't know what his musical background is. I do know he has scored movies. Didn't he score the Mark Zuckerberg movie about Facebook and all that? So I think what you have in someone like Trent Reznor is someone who's doing the same fucking thing those guys were doing. He is experimenting with the tools he has at his disposal. The one advantage he has is he knows how to write and play music.
Yeah.
He understands music theory, I would assume. And like you're saying, he has an understanding of what works in pop music and what makes a song sound catchy. And that's how he writes a song like Head Like a Hole, where you're like, this is actually a really good fucking song. And even though it has electronic elements and it has, this kind of mix, I think it's the approach he takes, I would assume, is one from the perspective of a musician who is now fortunate enough to live in a time where the stuff that the audio engineers were doing in the 70s is a lot easier to do now when you get into the 90s and the 2000s. So I think that's some of it as well, I would assume, with someone like Trent Reznor, is that he's still experimenting the same way these guys have always been experimenting with the tools that are at their disposal. It's just that Trent Reznor has more tools at his disposal and maybe more knowledge at his disposal, because not only does he have the knowledge of programs and instruments and music theory and how to write a song. He also has the knowledge of the past 30 years of industrial music behind him. And he knows what works, he knows what doesn't work. He has decades of pop music to pull from and see, hey, what works, what doesn't work. I know everyone, including Trent Reznor, says that Hurt is Johnny Cash's song now, but the Nine Inch Nails version still fucking rules. Yeah. And I love listening to that version. And that, I think, also shows his ability as a songwriter. If he can write that song that has that rock industrial feel while still being slow and sad, and Johnny Cash can play it as a fucking country song, and it sounds phenomenal either way, this guy knows what he's doing when he's writing music.
Yeah.
So it's cool to see someone like him, like you're saying, Nine Inch Nails is like the industrial band because he has perfected a formula that takes things that someone like you who loves the electronic dance feel and someone like me who prefers instrument-based, he's mashed them together in a way that is the perfect mix that anyone can enjoy.
Chris, I'm curious to know if you feel like you're leaving this episode feeling differently than you did at the end of our goth deep dive. Because these two genres are so closely related that I'm just really interested in hearing your take. How are you feeling at the end of this industrial metal deep dive versus how you felt at the end of the goth deep dive?
You know, at the end of the goth deep dive, you know, I admitted it was a struggle to not just insult the music for an hour. You know, I think I had a better maybe understanding of why someone might like goth music, but it clearly wasn't for me. Like I said at the beginning of this episode, industrial is a style of music that I've tried to get into before. And so while I've probably found some more songs that I'll listen to that are considered industrial metal while doing the research for this episode than I would have otherwise discovered, I kind of feel like my feelings on industrial metal is largely the same as it was before I started listening, you know, before we did this episode. I knew there were things I liked. I knew there were things I didn't like. This episode was kind of an opportunity for me to see if I could find more things that I like, you know, because I've tried before, like I said, I've tried listening to KMFDM and it wasn't for me. You know, Rammstein, I'd heard of them. They went on the tour and everyone was talking about the fucking 40-foot flames and people posting videos of seeing the flames from the stadium miles away. Like it's, you know, this band is huge, but I hadn't really gotten into it. And some of these bands, it was like, I liked one song. I like a handful of songs from Marilyn Manson, and that's been good enough for me for the last 20 years. I like a handful of songs from Rob Zombie, and that's been good enough. Even Ministry, I've discovered some songs, but still just been a handful of songs that's been enough for me for the past 20 years since I discovered No W. And so I've added to that, you know, internal playlist that I have now of Ministry songs that I like or industrial metal songs that I like, but I don't feel like my opinion has really changed. I think the only thing that's changed is that I have a better idea of where it came from, which I think is really interesting and makes it a little bit more fun to listen to, being like, okay, yeah, Al Jorgensen and Ministry singing A Colin Dick and Bush Just Hammering Away came from Kraftwerk playing Autobahn, you know? And I think that's a lot of fun.
All right, Chris, so I need you to do your best job looking through your industrial trash heap to give us your suggestion for this week.
So my suggestion this week is a bit of a story.
Okay,
I have already talked about the Ministry song No W, and I believe I've mentioned this song before. However, on Spotify right now, if you listen to Ministry's No W Redux on Houses of the Mole, that is not the version of the song that I like. It's good, but it's not the version of the song I like. The version of the song I like is called Psalm 23. Psalm 23 is on Houses of the Mole on Spotify, but it is not this version of No W. It is actually a different bonus track by the name of Bloodlines. So what I am suggesting to everyone is do your best to find a physical copy of Houses of the Mole, go to track 23, and listen to Psalm 23, which is my personal favorite version of No W by Ministry. It features like a children's choir singing the national anthem, then a speech from George Bush, then it goes into the rest of the song and has like a cool-ass guitar solo at the end, and then it just cuts off as it ends with George W. Bush saying, like, good night and God bless America, or something like that. And this is my favorite version of the song. Track 1 on the physical version is also different from what's on Spotify. It features a sample of the, I don't know if it's classical or opera, but O Fortuna. It uses that extensively. That's not the version I like. I like the version that is track number 3, known as Psalm 23. I had thought it was bonus track number 69, but that actually is the song Walrus on that album. So it's not track 69, which I thought. But yes, my suggestion is on the physical copy of Houses of the Mole by Ministry, listen to Psalm 23, which is the preferred version of their song, No W.
God damn. I think we just got word in. Yes, that's right. A second version has hit the tower. So. Oh, boy. So my suggestion for this week, I'm going to do a quick honorable mention. Because I feel like this band is sort of taking everything that we talked about with the pop sensibilities of Nine Inch Nails and the true old school industrial sound and blends them together perfectly. That is the band Three Teeth. I fucking love them. And I discovered them through the movie Guns Akimbo, where their versions of Ballroom Blitz and You Spin Me Round just had me fucking jaw on the floor. I was like, I need to fucking find out who this band is. They're so fucking cool. I love their song Slum Planet. That's really great. So yeah, just go check out Three Teeth. But if you like Three Teeth after listening to them, then you have to go back to another band that I mentioned earlier on in the episode, and that is Frontline Assembly. You need to check out this album, Millennium, because it is chock full of heavy metal goodness. I need you guys to listen to this album and see if you can pick out all the different classic thrash riffs that are sampled on this album. It is so cool to hear something that is so danceable, yet injecting these heavy metal riffs that we are all so familiar with and that we all love so much. So for my suggestion this week, check out the band Frontline Assembly and their album Millennium. Thanks for tuning into this episode of the Scrap Metal Podcast. The time has come for us to pack up our gear, but we'll be back to rock out with you in the next episode.
Stay metal, everyone.
Good night.